Good morning. Welcome to Sculpt Your Body Show. I'm excited to have a really special speaker with me today, Cynthia Thurlow. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Thanks for your time today. And I'd just like to maybe share with the audience a little bit about your background. You have pretty an extensive background in health and wellness, and as a former nurse or current nurse. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Yeah, so I started my whole healthcare journey first as an ER nurse in Baltimore and then later as a nurse practitioner working in cardiology. And after 16 years of working as an NP, I left clinical cardiology to start a business. So I'm also an entrepreneur and have a real passion for functional nutrition. So a lot of the work that I do is looking at how food can impact our mood and our health in really profound and powerful ways. I love to speak about these topics, and so I've done a couple TED Talks. My most popular one is on intermittent fasting, so that's another strategy I use with my female patients. But I really love, most of all, what I love best is my family. I have two boys and two doodles who hopefully will be very quiet during this interview, as well as my wonderful husband, and we live in Washington, D.C.
Great, thank you for that. I'm also a mom and entrepreneur, so so thank you for sharing that. It adds a lot of value when you can speak from being a parent and
Yes,
a woman who has that background. So thank you.
absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Mm. Well, I think, it's interesting that you brought up that you were also a parent. I think our children challenge us to be the best humans that we can be. And so when my oldest was born, he was exclusively breastfed, but developed terrible food allergies, had very significant eczema all over his body. And I kept asking the pediatrician, is it something I'm eating? Because I was breastfeeding. And the answer was always no, it's probably something environmental. So that kind of sent me down a rabbit hole of looking at how food influences our health. Ultimately, I started with a wellness coaching program, and then went in and started a doctoral program, and that wasn't the right thing, and then kind of fell into this functional nutrition program, which I feel like in many ways changed my entire family's life. We always ate healthfully, but then we learned a whole lot more. And so then I started looking much more closely at everything we were eating and how certain foods can influence our health, proactively or non-beneficially. But that's kind of where, it started. I always say my children are my passion project, wanting to create an environment that's as healthy as possible for them. But I always say it all stems from food, always, starts back at the roots of the choices that we make in terms of nutrition can make us as healthy as possible or make us as diseased as possible.
That's right. And I think education is really important, really diving into, and especially if you have some chronic issues or things and you start really researching, there's a lot of information out there, right, that we have to sort through.
And it's hard to make sense. There's a lot of noise. There are a lot of well-meaning social influencers, social media influencers, fit pros that, and I always say some because there are some incredible people, but I don't think anyone, shares information with the intention of not offering the best information. But I think that, what's most important to share about my story is that you can be as healthy as possible and still get very sick. And so the back end story to this year was that I ended up in the hospital with a ruptured appendix, was very, very sick, was in the hospital for 2 weeks. So sick that at one point they weren't entirely sure I was going to make it. I had every complication you can think of, and then rallied, did a talk the following month with a ruptured appendix, and then had surgery. But the point being, the reason why I was able to recover as quickly as I did was related to the fact that, my health and nutrition were really on point beforehand, and then I've done so well since. So I always say that, being healthy can help you weather some challenging times in your life, and in very proactive ways. I always say whatever doesn't kill you makes you grow, right?
Absolutely. It's a little bit of a science project when it comes to the body, and process of elimination is kind of what I've found. Because when I coach someone, it's always a little bit different with each person,
Sure.
right? But
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing that story. I did read that about your hospital stay, and it really does make you catalyst to really learning more about what's going on with yourself, so that
Mhm.
you can give good information.
Absolutely.
come from a place of knowledge, which is great. Now you have a nursing background as well. Was that before all of this?
Yeah, so my first college degree was in international studies, and I applied to law school and decided not to go. And then I took a couple of years to figure out what I wanted to do. I was off paying my own way, working for a Fortune 500 company, which I hated. Wasn't really my skill set. I didn't enjoy it. And so then I took 2 years of pre-med classes and then applied to a joint program for another bachelor's, because in nursing, you have to have a bachelor's in nursing, and then had also applied to a nurse practitioner program. So I graduated from my nursing program in 98. And then 3 years later, I finished my nurse practitioner program. So yeah, almost 20 years, which is kind of hard to believe. But what amazes me most and foremost is that all of those experiences got me to where I am today. So that, everything, the breadth of experience that I've had has been pretty extensive, just by virtue of the fact that I've been on both sides of the coin. I've seen very sick people. I've seen, healthy people, and how best to maintain their health in their bodies.
Right. Really important, really great background to lead you to where you are today. That reminds me to ask, so do you believe, and do you talk about how food affects our body as far as dealing with stress or being overwhelmed or mental wellness?
Yes. Yeah. So, food and mood are very intricately related. And so if you think about the bulk of our neurotransmitters, those chemicals in our bodies that, govern mood in many ways, are created in the gut. If you're eating a standard American diet, which means highly processed, highly inflammatory, generally very nutrient devoid, full of sugar, processed sugars, you're not going to produce the same quality of neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, etc., that someone that eats an organic diet, largely unprocessed, low sugar, low to no sugar, lots of vegetables, less fruits. Here in the United States, we tend to eat fruit and vegetables at a 3-to-1 ratio. It should be the opposite. It should be 3 vegetables for every fruit. And we're not talking about starchy vegetables. We're talking about actually green vegetables, leafy green vegetables. You could do a side-by-side comparison. There's actually a researcher, Trudy Scott, who does a lot of work in this area, talking about neurotransmitters and how critical it is for food and mood, in terms of anxiety, depression, etc. And I find for many of my patients, as soon as they start cleaning up their diets, their anxiety and depression symptoms improve tremendously. So I do feel that you are what you eat, and that food and mood are so intricately related. We shouldn't feel anxious and stressed after eating a meal. That would be a clue that something is not working well for our bodies. Nor should we feel like we need to be on 3 and 4 antidepressants when it might be that food is, one of the contributory issues. And even if someone is on less medication, that's obviously a positive to being on more medication. So always something worth considering, discussing with your healthcare provider if that's something that would be beneficial or helpful for you to do.
Yeah, I agree. You can actually, I'll say for me and my clients, you can actually feel how you feel after a certain meal, and how that affects it down the road. It's also amazing that so much food, like whole foods, can actually cure or aid in the betterment of diseases. I know my father passed away at a young age of diabetes, and what a shame, because fitness and good nutrition would have reversed that.
Absolutely. There's a large group of healthcare providers on Twitter that I follow and I interact with, and I've been on their podcast. They've been on ours. And when you start getting really smart people that are saying the dogma that I was trained in is no longer applicable. I always say that part of what I was trained in at the university I attended was to question everything. And so I do question everything. And what I was telling patients 20 years ago is very different from what I tell them now, and trying to explain that now we know better. You really do have to question, does it make sense, for example, that the low-fat, non-fat nonsense, when I got out of college, that was all very popular. Snackwell's cookies, which of course tasted horrible. You pull out the fat, what you're going to do is they're going to have a lot of sugar to make it palatable so people want to eat it. And so all these chemicals are not benefiting us in so many different ways. So I say get back to what's simple, less ingredients are best. If you don't recognize it, don't eat it. Really making a larger effort to be, looking at food as something that you need to learn more about. We've lost the art of cooking. We lost the art of being actively, vested and interested in how our food is prepared. And that's really critical.
It sure is, and I think a lot of it make people go toward convenience, but convenience shouldn't mean that you sacrifice your nutrition. So you just have to switch out some of those other things for something healthier, and it takes a little time, but it certainly can be done. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and this day and age we live in is a lot of medications out there, and I think those just mask what you could easily treat with food and meditation or physical fitness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, would you say, I know you do a lot of speaking and you have your podcast, who's influenced you over the time since you started schooling and through now? Who are the big hitters that influence you and have inspired you to do what you do now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would say, it runs the gamut. I tend to be pretty cerebral. So, there are people like Brene Brown and Gabrielle Bernstein who are, influencers in terms of mental health and mindset. Glennon Doyle is another one that I love. I love her work. But I would say in terms of, really looking at, the science and the nutrition piece, there's a lot of different people. I would say people like Rob Wolf, who's actually a researcher, but, very well known in the paleo community. Certainly Dave Asprey, I actually had an opportunity to meet him over the summer. He's just incredible. But, these biohackers, people that are, asking the difficult questions, saying, how can we do this better? How can we do this easier? How can we, improve our sleep quality as a given? My bookcase is right next to me, so I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting some of my favorite ones. People like, I would say that anyone that is making us think outside the box. Jason Fung is a physician. He is considered to kind of be the modern day father of intermittent fasting. And obviously I follow his work closely, obviously has influenced me in many, many ways. But, having people that are researchers, that are other healthcare providers that are, kind of on the same path, they're seeing that, diet is playing a really huge role in making our society incredibly diseased. We're increasingly sedentary. The involvement and the influx of all this false light, that we get from electronics. We're in offices. We're not spending any time in nature. We're not getting good quality sleep. We're not connecting to a higher purpose. We're spending way too much time on social media or attached to our phones. We're getting all these dopamine surges, and we're not really connected to one another anymore. So I would say that that's a small list of people that I follow and have influenced me. Mindset wise, I think is so critical, especially as an entrepreneur, because it's kind of like we do this. And then, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the woman whose mastermind I'm part of, JJ Virgin, is obviously a huge influence.
That was her name was what? JJ Virgin?
JJ Virgin. And she's an incredible cutting edge person in the health and wellness space. So I would say definitely those are the people that come to mind first, but obviously there are many others that I'm probably forgetting to include, but that's a good short list for sure.
It's an amazing list of heavy hitters, that's why I ask, because I'm always looking to explore those who are cutting edge and bringing things to the surface. Our world is got obese, and I think we're trying to reverse some of that, and also aging. I feel like aging can also be reversed with a balance of food and fitness and meditation and yoga, or whatever those things that kind of bring you back to your center, because it's pretty easy to get scattered out there when you're out there, in the day-to-day life.
It is. And I think, for women, as they get closer to perimenopause, the 5 to 7 years preceding menopause, and what many women don't realize is that can be as early as your late 30s, early 40s. If you're in that age group, you're absolutely there. The average age of menopause in the United States is 52. So that means many people are going through that earlier. And, when women make that transition and our ovaries are producing less progesterone and there's more stress and strain on our adrenal glands, what you're really speaking to is increased propensity for blood sugar dysregulation, food sensitivities, more inflammation. It's all about brain health. And I always say, if we're not taking good care of ourselves, that's a time in a woman's life where it's a very slippery slope. Women will come to me and they're pained by the fact that they put on a little weight, they're not sleeping, they seem to be sensitive to foods they were able to eat for many, many years. And it's really all goes back to mindset, self-care, really critical. The other thing that I see a lot of women doing in that particular age group is they're over-exercising to compensate for the weight gain. And what they're doing is they're actually making it worse. They're driving that cortisol level up higher, which is, putting them in a fat storage mode. And so they just can't seem to lose the weight. And so it becomes this, dangerous kind of circle that they're in. They're kind of like the rat on the wheel without getting results. So definitely a time to reflect on making some changes for the better.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. You touched on it earlier, and I have a lot of clients ask me about it, and I'd like to hear your take on the intermittent fasting. I know it's been around for, hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And so there is some truth to it. There is some, it does work if you do it correctly. So give us your background and take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have been practicing intermittent fasting for almost 4 years. And to me, I really feel that it is the potential for, the fountain of youth in terms of, aging inside. Everyone focuses on the exterior. I always say it's the internal that's the most important. But, when we're looking at it as a strategy, not only for weight loss or, improving our longevity, we're really talking about more fasting than feasting. Meaning that, we do more time during the day, not eating and allowing our bodies to be in digestive rest, which drives down hormones like insulin. Insulin levels are low. We have increased mental clarity. It also boosts a process called autophagy, which is a fancy way of saying, it's kind of like spring cleaning for the cells. It's only evoked when we're not eating. So really important, even if someone decides they only want to do the strategy 1 day a week, but I do encourage people to do it consistently, meaning daily, if at all possible. I do find that men seem to enjoy the 1 meal a day concept or doing a shorter feeding window. I just find most women really need a 6 to 8 window in order to get 2 meals then. But what they find is they're no longer snacking. They're no longer eating at night. They're, even if you do nothing else, just staying within a shorter feeding window will drive, some fat loss, which as our bodies kind of shift into this fat burning mode, they're using fat as a fuel source as opposed to carbohydrates. And so I'm just feeling like over time, that strategy in particular has gotten to be hugely popular. And I think many, many people are finding that combined with either cycling their carbohydrates or a lower carbohydrate meal or philosophy is working really well. I don't find that necessarily ketogenic diets work for every woman, but lower carbs, more carb cycling seems to work really beneficially. And so I encourage women to experiment with those strategies. Obviously, I think that, my last TED talk that I gave, it's just focused on women, but men can do it as well. It's not just a gender slanted strategy. It's something that a lot of people can do. And, here's the caveat. It's free. Unlike all these potions and powders and shakes and crap that's out there that people
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people feel like they've got to buy into the latest thing. And I always say, listen, if but nothing else, you can try it out. It works great. If you need accountability, there's lots of people out there, including myself, that offer accountability for those kinds of things. But to me, I think it's a really fantastic option for most individuals. I always say there's always most, not everyone. Obviously not a great strategy if you're, a child or if you're frail or if you have a history of an eating disorder. I see a lot of the fit pros on social media that I suspect are probably anorexics, and they kind of hide their eating disorder within the confines of intermittent fasting. But for most of us that have a healthy relationship with food, it's a really great way to harness the benefits of more fasting than feasting.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And I think people just need to know, how to get started and, have an accountability party or a doctor that helps them get them on the right track.
Absolutely.
And it definitely rolls over into your mental, wellness. I think food can add to, thinking more clearly and, just being able to manage your mind and manage your stress. Would you say that food plays a huge part into managing your mind and your stress levels?
I do. And this is where it goes back to, trying to eat nutrient dense whole foods, protein, healthy fats, vegetables are really the mainstay or should be the mainstay of our diets. We start getting in alcohol and sugary foods. That's when people get sleepy. That's when all of a sudden their appetite gets dysregulated, meaning they don't appear to be satiated with anything. And so I always kind of try to educate my patients that if you can't reduce your cravings, you're not going to be able to lose weight. So it's really about managing expectations around meals and ensuring that you start with protein and healthy fats first, which will keep you full and satiated, and then adding in carbohydrates, and then acknowledging it's okay to have an occasional treat, but don't let a treat turn into a whole day of eating like garbage. And the next thing you know, you've gained, 10 pounds back. So it's really about, we're all little science experiments. Finding what works best for you and your body is really critical, and listening to your body. I think that's the other piece. We're very disconnected from our bodies. We don't think about how we feel when we are engaged in eating. And largely this is because we don't even recognize that our brain is the first area of digestion in our bodies. So first organ in digestion is the brain, not our mouths. Everyone guesses mouths. Kids, adults, all alike will answer it's mouths. But I'd like to remind them that we have to tap into this rest and repose side of our central nervous system in order for that to be activated. So if we're yelling at our spouse, if we're driving in our car, if we're eating while we're feeding our kids, if we're stressed and upset at work and we're trying to eat, your body's not optimized to accept the food that you're eating. And so that can be, problematic as well. So just acknowledging that we should set aside time to eat a meal every single day. We're not on our iPad, we're not on our computer, we're not in front of the TV, really tapping into that rest and repose side of our bodies. I'm probably preaching to the choir when I say that, but I can't tell you how many women are surprised to understand that digestion starts in our brains. It really, really does.
Right. Choices. I also find that we're in a society today and in a place where a lot of people use caffeine to, get through their day. And I've always believed and have coached that, that's actually going to suppress your eating and your appetite. And but it's there. A lot of people do use caffeine. And how do you think caffeine affects our bodies?
Yeah, well, caffeine is a stimulant. And so I think it can hide, if someone says to me, I have 1 cup of coffee a day and I'm fine, that doesn't bother me. When someone says I need to have 5 cups in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, and I need to have a soda in between, and, oh, by the way, I can't fall asleep at night, then, caffeine is a drug. And I think people don't look at it as that way. And so a little bit of caffeine is fine. It can be thermogenic, meaning it can be fat burning. It's a great, option if you want to drink something while you're intermittent fasting. And coffee, plain tea, or water are all great options. It can be dehydrating. So it's just like anything. Moderation is really critical. If you're doing a frappuccino every day, those liquid calories can be hugely detrimental to your nutrition program. So just really educating people that you need to be smart about the choices that you're making. And if you are dependent on caffeine, if you are worried about going through withdrawal, if you don't consume caffeine, or if you can't get through your day without it, then those are signs that it's probably not benefiting you. Another piece that I find is some people are so sensitive to it that they don't recognize that it actually upsets their stomach. And so they'll say, oh, when I cut out caffeine, all of a sudden I didn't have problems with reflux. I didn't have problems with feeling like my stomach was burning all the time. I was able to go to the bathroom on my own. Caffeine can be a stimulant, meaning it can make it easier for people to go to the bathroom. But I have just as many other people who will say, oh gosh, I deal with constipation issues all the time. And, when I got off of caffeine, it was all of a sudden better. So those emotional and physical cues can let you know if caffeine works for your body.
Right. And like you say, moderation, in that regard is really important, and not being dependent on it.
Right.
And I know it's hard for a lot of people too, but if you even cut back, that's always beneficial to just recognize that could be a problem, and you start doing things and see how you feel. I know a lot of my friends drink coffee. And pre-workouts and other things to kind of get themselves going. But you really need to rely on your own energy and your own, internals to get you going. And food plays a huge part of that. I agree.
Okay. Can I mention one thing? I get a lot of questions about what people can consume while they're fasted. And so when you mentioned pre-workout, that triggered me to remind myself to mention this. So if you consume protein or carbs during your fast, you've broken your fast. So all these pre-workouts generally are full of branched chain amino acids, or they've got, protein in them. And I just like to remind people, if you're in a fasted state, you will break your fast. There are fit pros out there that will tell people if it's under 50 calories, it doesn't matter. Pre-workouts don't matter. I tend to be a little bit of a purist, and I just like people to understand there's different types of fasting. There's water fasting, which is what I advocate for. There are some people who are consume bone broth while they're fasting, or they'll do bulletproof coffee. then you're not really fasting. That's just another form of fasting. It's just not the true intrinsic one. Because remember what I mentioned, that big fancy word autophagy, that gets turned off when you eat. As soon as you eat, it gets turned off. So why not be a purist, at least for when you do fast, and make sure you do it right and save the other things for your feeding window.
Right. No, I agree completely. And that's why I'm so glad you mentioned that in detail. I have a lot of people, a lot of friends and clients try the intermittent fasting, and I think it can be done wrong and not be effective. So it's something else, you know. So it's really important, I think, to stick with something for a little while just to see if it's going to work for you. And then if it doesn't, I think you'll know, and then you can make the adjustment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I usually say 30 to 60 days if it's anything new lifestyle wise to really get a sense for whether or not does this serve me? Do I have more energy? Am I sleeping better? What are my cravings like? It's that, you know, kind of mental kind of check in with your body.
Right, right. Good point. Do you coach? I know you coach, or you know, you treat mostly women and probably some men too. Where do you bring in the fitness part to your you know, them and let them know that there's got to be some of that in there too?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a component. Just coincidentally, most people who come to me, they're already active in some regard, but I always use the term movement. Movement's important to incorporate into our lives every single day, not just, oh, I went to the gym today, so I get to check the box. You know, thinking about the fact that midday, even if you work from home as an entrepreneur, sometimes my husband, who also works from home, will get out and walk our dogs. But, you know, we start our day with exercise, and that works for our lifestyle, whether it's lifting weights, whether it's, you know, solid core or bar, or, you know, doing some type of HIIT training. I'm all about maximizing during a specific time period. Like, gone are the days where I have hours and hours and hours to spend at the gym. I really have to be efficient with my time. So it's always discussed, and it's meeting people where they are. Some people aren't ready to be in the gym lifting weights, but they are ready to go for a walk in their neighborhood. Maybe they're not ready to take a bar class, but they're ready to do some core work at home. And so really assessing and meeting patients where they are is really important. Unfortunately, I see a lot of times there's a mismatch. You'll get a very enthusiastic person who's a personal trainer, coach, healthcare provider, you name it, you know, any title, working with someone who's kind of ready to dip their toe in the pond. They're not ready to jump right in. And you will lose that, that ability to influence the person you're working with if you don't assess where they are in terms of readiness to change. And so that's a really critical piece. I think irrespective of gender, it's, are you ready to just contemplate making the changes, or are you really ready to go all in?
Right. And I think you said the word that comes up quite a bit is just movement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just getting the body, this blood circulating and things flowing can, you know, really address a lot of things. So
Absolutely.
movement.
Mental health, people sleep better, you know, their blood sugar's better controlled. I mean, anything is better than nothing. And you know, one of the things I was talking to my team about earlier today, there's a lot of this all or nothing mentality. Oh, if I can't eat perfect all day long, then I can't do it at all. Oh, I can't work out for an hour, so I can't do it at all. And I always remind people something is better than nothing. Slow and steady wins the race. It's far more important to just move forward than it is to have that all or nothing mentality, because, you know, let's be honest, you didn't get to be the weight you are right now overnight. You're not going to take all the weight off overnight. Your dietary habits didn't change in one day. They're not going to be able to be changed all in one day. So just being kind to yourself and giving yourself some grace, I think goes a really long way.
Right. Well, you say the same thing that I tell my clients and friends: slow and steady wins the race. You know, don't expect instant results, though you can start feeling really well right away just by, you know, implementing some of those things. But yeah, it's definitely something that you have to just be consistent.
Correct. And it needs to be, you know, the other piece I think is really important for people to hear is that it needs to be something you can do forever, not it's a diet. I'm going to do this for a month and then I'm going to go back to my old ways. You need to think of those changes as things that you can implement successfully long term. And if you are able to make that mindset shift, then it's a new way of looking at the world in so many different ways. You know, I find that a lot of people, when they make nutritional shifts, you know, profound ones, whether they decide to go from eating a standard American diet to being carnivore or paleo or keto, etc., they become very, very dedicated to that, you know, that particular mindset. But what works for one may not work for another. And so just recognizing that, you know, this is a lifestyle, this is a long-term strategy, this is a long game, not a short game. And I think that's another critical component that I think for many years even as a healthcare provider, we didn't stress that enough with our patients. And so now it's an ongoing discussion that I have with people pretty readily.
Yeah, so important. Really shedding a lot of light on that, I think, will help people, along the way. And whether, like you said, whether you're starting in one place or you're already been doing fitness, I think it's really, really smart what you're saying. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now, I know we're wrapping it up here a little bit. Is there anything else? I know we could just talk all day about this stuff. So
Absolutely.
valuable. And I love, your input on it. Anything that you think that we've left out that you think the audience would really value? That you take away from this?
I mean, I think it always starts with mindset. I mean, we have to start with the mindset piece because that's what drives our success. It's acknowledging that why we're doing this, always coming back to why are you making these decisions? Why are you making these changes? Ensuring it's for the right reasons. And, ultimately we want to be able to age, and I always say age in reverse, or, age as gracefully as possible. I internally feel 30, but I'm no longer chronologically that age. But in my mind, that's how good I feel. And so I want to continue feeling that way throughout my lifetime. And so I remind my patients when I'm talking with them, I want you to think about what's your why. It's really important to know what your why is so that you can remind yourself of that when you have a tough day. And we all have them. All of us. I don't care how fit you are. I don't care how thin you are. I don't care how much money you have, how much education. Every single person has a day where they're just not going to feel as good. And so you want to reflect on that why so it'll help drive you forward.
Right. The mindset is so key. And I think that's been the real heart, the core of what I teach too, is just you've got to get into a place where you can manage that and that it becomes, a habit and routine. And then, it all translates. I really believe that.
Absolutely. That's so great. I love the work that you're doing with your clients as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to share our interview with our audience because I know they're going to get so much value out of it. Now, I know you do some speaking before we finish up. I know you do some speaking. Where can the audience find you and hear more about what you do? And
thank you. So my website is www.cynthiathurlow.com. I am very active on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I have a free community group on Facebook called Cynthia's Circle. I know not a fantastic name, but it's been transitioning from my old business name to my new business name. But I'm in all of those places, and I welcome hearing from you all.
Great. Yeah, we'll find you. And I'm really glad that I got to connect with you today. I really am feeling very grateful that you could share all that information with the audience. And just want to say thank you. You're glowing today, so you must have had a good morning of food and being around family. That always helps.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just recovering from a red eye back from Scottsdale, so I appreciate that.
You're glowing. But again, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for your time today, and we are so looking forward to finding you and hearing more about what you have to say because it's super valuable for women and men.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
All right. You have a great day today.
Thanks. You too.